Some people are going to tell you that you shouldn't use this system, which is a rigid hierarchy, to save your files, and instead you should use tags. And I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And here's why. Okay, so the argument goes that because computers do allow you to store anything anywhere you want, why would you possibly limit yourself to this system, which in many ways is designed to mimic the real world, where you have to decide essentially which box a thing will be in, which folder a thing will be in, and then limit yourself to putting that thing in one box. And instead, because what computers do allow you to do is to assign tags to things. Think how you might assign tags to your music. You might assign different tags for genres or artists, or you might assign tags to your photographs, landscape versus portrait, or who's in it, or which holiday you're on. And there are some things for which tags are great, music and photos. But for most things, for most people, tags are not how we think about things, because yes, computers can do that. But most people, when just trying to save important documents and then retrieve them again later, or when trying to just run a project at work and just trying to save files so that they know where they are, we are spatial people. We think in terms of spatial awareness, because spatially we've had all of human history, millions of years of evolution to think spatially. And computers were invented in the 1960s or whatever. And so we just don't think in tags. Tags don't make things easier for the vast majority of people. Now, if you are a computer science researcher and you want to use tags and you're doing research into tags, knock yourself out, right? I don't care what you do. But the idea that most normal people who aren't computer science researchers, the idea that most normal people like my dad, should use tagging systems to organize things like their pension files and their documentation, their day-to-day life, is patently absurd, and I wish it would go away. And that's why I think tags are stupid. Here's another reason. Tags solve the problem of having to decide, I suppose, where a thing is, which is a problem. You do have to decide where a thing goes. But now, instead of deciding on this structure of folders, which is your Johnny.Decimal system, where you eventually put your pension documentation at 13.43, what you've instead got to do is just decide on some tags. You haven't solved a problem, you've just moved the problem around. So I will challenge you to look at anybody's system of tags. We all use tags. My favorite one is to look at the list of genres in Apple Music. And it is a shambles, because you haven't solved the problem of organizing things magically by just using tags. All you've done is just give yourself a different problem to solve. And I have yet to see an implementation of tags that isn't just a confusing mess of tags. It doesn't solve the problem, and it's a bad idea. So can we please just put it down? Of course, the other one is people say, well, why would you bother organizing your things neatly? Why would you bother putting in work to make sure you could find your stuff again when computers can just search? And computers can search, and that would be absolutely fantastic if you had like 50 things. But when you try and search your computer's really good at searching. It just pulls up so much stuff, and I find that search is useful, right? I'm not saying never search for anything, but the idea that you would simply abandon any concept of organization and just put all your stuff in a folder and have at it with your search is absurd. And again, for most normal people, that would just result in a situation of stress. Here's the other thing with search is that you never know, you can never be certain that you found the correct, only latest version of a thing, because my computer's littered with files, copies of, well, mine isn't, of course, yours probably is, but I mean, you know, my downloads folder, right? I might download thing, you get the idea. There are copies of things everywhere. The point of, and this is really bad at work, by the way, where by default, clicking something in somewhere like SharePoint or what the hell is it called these days? It used to be called Skype for Business, and I can never stop thinking of Teams and Skype for Business. Every time you click something, you get another copy, and you are now working on multiple copies, and you do not want to be working on multiple copies of, say, a proposal document or a budget spreadsheet. What you want is to be able to go to a folder by navigating it yourself, because you know where it is, to go through the project and then to finance and then to the budget and to find the one spreadsheet in one folder where you know you're working on the right one, you're not working on a duplicate, you're not working on last week's copy. And that is the major problem I see with search. There's no guarantee with search that you've found that single copy. So does search replace the requirement for you to put in some work and neatly organize your own files? It does not. Now, I still use search in my index, in my JDEX, because it's really helpful when given a limited scope. I've said before that you don't need to remember these numbers that I'm going to introduce with Johnny.Decimal. I'm not expecting you remember 13.43 as your pension, because what you can do is go to your JDEX and just search for pension. You can search within category 13, which you know is finance already for pension. So you don't have to search this entire space of things. You can narrow your search to the place you know where you need to be. And then don't go looking up and down the numbers for pension if you don't want to, just search for pension. But what you're now searching is a much more limited, controlled set of stuff. You're not just searching everything that's ever been on your computer and every website you've ever browsed. You're searching a place that you control. And so search is useful when you control the search results. And that's what your JDEX is. Finally, people say, oh, these numbers in your things, how am I going to remember these numbers? I'm not asking you to remember any numbers, right? And the other thing with numbers is that people use them all the time anyway. It's actually quite difficult to find a screenshot of somebody's files online where this person is talking about having neatly organized files, assuming they do not already use Johnny.Decimal, where there are not already numbers at the start of folders, because what numbers do is to lock things in place. The alphabet, notoriously, lets you put a new thing in a folder, and if you put something up at A and you've got something way down in the alphabet, things are going to move around as people add and remove or rename folders. And so you lose the ability to get that muscle memory of just knowing where a thing is. Of course, the other thing is that the alphabet or words are ambiguous. We already spoke in a previous video about, you might call it finance or budget or any other number of money-related words. And what people do by putting a number at the front of the thing is by locking it in space and by giving themselves a unique reference that doesn't change. The number might be meaningless. 13 for my category finance has no meaning or relation to the concept of finance. It's simply a number that never changes. And that's really, really important. So people object to the numbers, but then those same people go to work and use numbers all day long to keep things in place in a folder structure. The numbers you use at work, not that I'm criticizing them, I understand why people do it. I used to do it before I invented this thing. The numbers at work don't have any structure. All Johnny.Decimal does is just put a bit of structure around these numbers and makes them much more useful and gives you a whole bunch of other places you can use them. So in summary, tags are dumb, search is broken, Johnny.Decimal's the answer.